We're going to talk a little bit about how this film evolved because, I think one of our issues is it's so hard to get a project off the ground. I mean, really hard. Uh, Practically a miracle, and every film that comes out really is. So, Julie, could you talk a little bit about the evolution of the project, how it started, and, from the pitch
Sure.
onward?
Yeah, I mean, originally it was Laurie Silverbush and Christy Jacobson. Laurie comes from a narrative background, and Christy from documentary, and they knew each other and had started to talk about this idea. Laurie was mentoring a young girl and found out that she was going without food, and her family was going out without food, and that was causing a lot of the issues that were coming up in her life and her education. So they came together, and then Ryan Harrington and I came on to produce. And we had an angel funder who gave us money, kind of jumped in, one of those leap of faith people who you can't make documentaries without, or can't start documentaries without a lot of times. And she gave us the money, and we went out and filmed and created a trailer, essentially, a kind of a pitch reel for the film. And we created materials for it, and we started to do a couple of things. We started to raise money, like little bits of money that we were putting together, kind of cobbling the budget together. And at the same time, we started to talk to people who are on the ground in this issue, fighting every day. And we brought together people in kind of a summit in Washington at Bread for the World at their offices. David Beckman's in the film. And we had people from all different groups, and all, from faith groups, from, USDA, and they came together and we talked about this. We really wanted to understand what their issues were, and that was an amazing meeting. The second amazing thing that happened was when we had a fundraiser here in LA, and Courtney and Diane came and saw the trailer and knew about it, but and then there was a subsequent meeting, and participant came on board, and it was kind of like, now you can make your film. And the great thing about working with them is, as Courtney's saying, it really is, what's the story, who are the characters? It's not like, okay, how are we gonna, kind of take this message and, put a book onto a screen. It's really, how are we gonna find people that are engaging and that are relatable and who are also willing to share their stories, which is hard. With this film, this is a very, it's stigmatized. People who are hungry in this country are stigmatized. And to get them to open up on camera, know that their stories are going to be shared, that's a big deal. And so it was going out there without cameras and going and meeting people, taking a trip without shooting at all, and going place after place. And we had a lot of stories that we chased that didn't come through, and a lot of characters, but we knew when we, when Colburn, when that first visit was like, this is really rich, and it's actually almost like the town is a character. Rosie's a character, Pastor Bob, the Apple Hands, I love his name, the policeman. So, and Joel, and his family. So you have all of this kind of creating a character, essentially, and Barbie and the witnesses and Mariana were also, going to hit something that was different, but we had something, so you have a story that's kind of a more urban story, but we wanted something that's more rural as well, that's unexpected. And Mississippi, because of the crazy statistics of Mississippi of having, the highest food insecurity, the highest obesity, was definitely a place we wanted to go to, and that took a long time. But then we met Miss Cherry, and all was right in the world.
So how did you actually go about convincing somebody?
You don't convince them. You just talk about what you're doing, and they have to want to do it. I mean, it really has to, because they're gonna. It's a whole process. You explain what it is, what your goals are, what you hope this film can be and do, and what their part in it can mean, and they have to really be on board, kind of jump in with you with both feet, because it's. If you're pulling somebody to do it, I mean, and that happens, you start to shoot with somebody and then they kind of back off and they say, we can't do this. And you go down a road, and it's an expensive road, and also it's emotionally difficult because you're spending this time, you're imagining them as part of this film, and then suddenly that's over. So you really have to build that connection.
And there's an issue of trust. And one thing that I wanted to ask, because we have a lot of young filmmakers who really are just jumping in, and you were talking about emotional involvement, but it's also emotional involvement on a level that is so personal for the filmmaker. Because here you see, like, for example, that one woman that was crying, I can't feed my kids. As a filmmaker, you want it, you're in the room, right? So how do you not say, well, here's $100? Do you see what I'm saying? How do you not get attached in that way or participate in the film in that way?
That's really the hardest thing with documentaries like this, because you also feel like you're kind of going into somebody's world and you're going to leave and go back to your world, which is you're in a much more privileged position. It's trying to understand that making this film might help them in surprising ways, so that it's in that moment, you might buy some food for their kids, but that's a Band-Aid. You're not changing something. Actually, with Barbie, what was kind of amazing is when the film showed at Sundance, someone came up and offered to pay for her college education.
Isn't that fabulous?
So you have things like that.
That's fabulous.
And actually, what's interesting about Sundance is that, a lot of times you bring people, kind of talking to that idea is that, you bring people to a festival like Sundance, and it's this kind of bizarre, otherworldly experience, and then they go home. And that's really tough. So you have to be sensitive about it. And these guys were just great, because we had been talking about bringing Rosie, and they were like, no. And it was so true. It's like, as soon as you said that, we're like, of course we can't, But you can't do that with a kid, because that is really unfair.
How different was the little trailer that you did from the movie?
Barbie was in it, but none of the other characters in the film, because it was early days. It was quite different.
So, Courtney, that was enough. Talk about how
good.
picked it up. I'm sure it was fabulous. It was so fabulous. How did you get into that?
It's an interesting question, because I think while absolutely a film starts with story and character, and without that you have nothing, when you're working for a company that has, we have a double bottom line, which is really special, that we have social return and financial return. We have to think about other issues. One, how will we market this film? How do we book this film on, press-wise when it comes out? Who's the team behind it? Do we trust the producers? Do we trust the filmmakers? Is there even, just from our point of view, a potential social issue that Alden and her team can take on? So we have to think about all those things when we're talking about a project. And this one in particular certainly had the story. You've seen these characters, and just Barbie was enough to let you know that there are a million other people that could fill those shoes too. But it was also the team, Julie and Ryan and the two directors. We trusted them, we know them. They each brought something special to the team, which was important for this film. And then also the people that are in the film. You don't want to just use movie stars for the sake of using movie stars, but it helps to have Jeff Bridges and Tom Colicchio in your film, because they can go out and talk about the film in a way that, unfortunately, usually documentary people are not going to be able to get that same sort of coverage. So we knew that we had bookable talent. So that was just the kind of...
And who were organic, too. Tom was executive producing the film, and he was, running around with us doing all these pitches and hosting these fundraisers. And so, and this is his issue.
Yeah, that's
and
important.
Same with Jeff Bridges.
It's important to say, because a lot of people will come in and say, I have this documentary, and I can get Brad Pitt to EP it. And I was like, well, that's great, but it's not going to be something that he's, in. It's not going to be something that he's going to be the face of. So for this film, because Jeff Bridges and Tom were both so connected to it, and this has been their issue for so long, they made sense. And that became part of the fabric of what this film could be. And ultimately... And T-Bone. Well, T-Bone came in a little later, but...
but you guys, had a connection to him.
To T-Bone Burnett, which then was like, oh my gosh, this music god was going to come on and got the Civil Wars. It was, really such a blessing of riches in so many ways on a creative, marketing, everything. And then for Alden, I think some of that spilled over too, hopefully, to the campaign. But we kind of, in the beginning, just have a very basic idea of what we would do social action-wise, and then these guys come in and really push it out.
So how did you push it out?
So
wait, just one quick thing. So you come in after the film has been committed to, and after it's made, or during that process? during the making process?
We're involved in the greenlighting process.
You
So
are.
yeah, the greenlighting process on this predated me, so I wasn't involved in that section. But in just sort of general processes that we look at any film that Courtney and Diane and then our films colleagues in narrative bring to us, and we try and find, is there an issue, is there a tippable issue, is there something that we can really latch onto here and try and make change around that either fits within sort of the zeitgeist of what's going on or with even Jeff Skoll's sort of objectives. And so there are lots of different things that we sort of look at and tap into. And for A Place at the Table, I mean, there's so much richness to the story, and it's affecting so many people. So when we do this, we look at what's the landscape, where are the issues. It's interesting, when we were looking at developing the campaign last June, everyone was like, the Farm Bill, it's going to be all about the Farm Bill. They're going to be reauthorizing it, and we have to get involved, and the film's going to come out too late, and oh my gosh, rush. And the Farm Bill kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and the Farm Bill still hasn't been reauthorized. So, so you can't really peg things necessarily to legislative issues all the time in the sense of particular pieces of legislative policy. What you can do, and what we've tried to do with this campaign, is really, the campaign's called Take Your Place, and it's take your place in the fight to end hunger. And really, it's about people getting involved both on the national level and as well as on the local level. So what we know is that we need a national answer. We need a national answer to end hunger, and that isn't something that is being really addressed. I mean, right now we're trying to sort of just get the stopgaps around people who are on SNAP and things like that. And so that's really our sort of big priority and push with the national groups that we're working with, so the national NGOs that we partner with.
It's interesting because I wanted to talk a little bit about distribution here, because on one hand, if you're an independent documentary maker and you don't have the arm that you have to go and do all that, a lot of that's being done by yourself. So some of this can be very overwhelming, and particularly in this issue, corporate greed really plays a large part of this because of these corporations that try to stop certain things, and that can affect distribution. I'm wondering, in terms of the film distribution part of it, how does one distribute something like this?
Okay, it's almost like two parts. If we didn't have participant, what would have happened?
Right.
And having participant as our partner, and it's very different, because distributors want to have a relationship with participant. They have a great history, great track record, and they want to work with them. So that, and I think the team with the film that the film brings also is a team that is attractive to distributors. So I think in this case, it wasn't like we were going for Universal, who has some kind of a deal that might be kind of. It's because it's we can distribute it through a company like Magnolia. We have a lot more freedom, and we don't have that kind of possibility of corporate censorship with this film. And the other thing that's kind of amazing is we have other corporations like Panera, who are there a lot of progressive corporations, smaller corporations. Look, we're not going to be underwritten by Monsanto. That's not going to happen with this film, and we're not, and we're definitely bringing things up that corporations don't want raised. And there have been situations with the film where people have backed off because they felt like it was potentially controversial. People that we were going to do partnerships. But you just kind of press on. And I think if we didn't have participant, it might have been a harder road. But I think the film also stands as the film, and we have a lot of this kind of huge package with it that we were talking about, with people that are going to be able to get press, and people that are bringing in kind of a really high level of music, and there's something that kind of elevates it so that you can kind of push through. And I think that we're really lucky because we were able to have Magnolia put it out in theaters, on VOD, on iTunes, which is great because we want people to be able to see it. And there are only so many theaters you get to with documentaries. Even the most successful documentaries don't get everywhere. And this way we can really find a way to reach people, which was interesting. I'd never done that before.
You see, and that's really interesting. So with Courtney, you were talking about the bottom lines, the two bottom lines. And okay, in a film like this, do you believe that you can make money with it. I mean, that's been the big difficulty.
I think this film in particular, every film is completely different. If you looked at our slate, I could say that one we knew we wouldn't make any money on. This one we thought we might. This whatever. This one we did because we had such a success with Food Inc. And we have a huge community of people that we've already captured that we talk to on a daily basis through our Take Part website, and they're very engaged and very interested. Plus, I mean, as far as timing, this couldn't be better timing for this issue. I mean, if you turn on the news every day, they're talking about it. So this one we thought that we could, and we still think that we can, and it is an interesting distribution model, which we've never done either, which is this day and date. So the numbers, when you look at the box office right now, it probably doesn't look as good as it should, or you would think it would, given the amount of exposure we've had. But there's a lot of VOD and iTunes numbers coming in that, at the end of the day, it will probably be considered a successful, financially successful film.
So what does that mean, a financially successful film? Because the margin, I mean, I don't think people here have a clue yet.
I think that for us, and probably for anyone, a successful film would be it makes its money back. If you make your money back on a documentary, it's good.
So it's a break-even
yeah,
situation.
for distributors,
How's
it's
that?
probably has to be better than that. I mean, for production companies, it's that, and especially for us. If you do Food Inc. numbers, or Waiting for Superman, Inconvenient Truth, you're dancing in the street. But I mean, those are rare instances. So for a company like mine that's a double bottom line, we are not even required to get back 100% of our money to be successful, because social return is equal to financial return. But I would say the easy answer is if you make your money back, it's a success.
And how does that figure for the filmmaker?
Well, if you're working with participant and you have a decent budget, you pay yourself, and then you don't ever expect to see another penny.
You see, so the key here is pay yourself.
Yeah.
Because
Don't pay yourself in back end.
Yeah, never.
Not on
Which,
doc.
which is what happens with a lot of our documentary makers. You start out and it's all, and then you get into this rut of even using your own money. So it
Yeah,
becomes
no.
very, very scary. But that's a good lesson. Pay yourself.
It seems to me to be a very partisan issue, and I thought the film did a very interesting kind of dance there by not kind of very aggressively going after the political party that seems to be holding up progress.
Well,
And so could you talk about the thought process behind how to walk that fine line so that you don't piss off half the
Yeah.
country?
Well, you really do have to think about that. But if you look at what happened in 1968, that was a bipartisan effort that made huge changes. There's no reason that shouldn't take place, and there are people on both sides of the aisle that feel strongly about this issue in a positive sense. Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, it's you want to point fingers, and we had to think about that when we were editing, because what you don't want to do is alienate people. I mean, the people in Colburn, a lot of the people there, they vote Republican. They're strong Republicans, and it's not about that vote. It's about kind of having an awareness that everyone feels responsible for, in that our political leaders. So if you alienate people, I mean, people will look at this and think it's totally one-sided because we talk about this issue at all. So it's that when you have, it's really interesting when you hear reactions. But yeah, you have to think about it, and you have to hold back sometimes.
And then for the participant folks, how does participant quantify? What kind of metrics do you use to? Obviously, the financial bottom line is clear, standard accounting practices, and everything. But how does one quantify the social return bottom line?
Yeah, I'll take that. So we have something that we're developing right now called sort of the participant index, and that's essentially to create a standardized way of looking at impact. And so in its current incarnation, it's about policy change, it's about personal behavior, attitude change, and it's about participation. And so it's really about those different metrics and looking at them. And each film is a little bit different. So this film might be a little bit more policy focused because there's so much of this that goes on in Washington. A movie like Lincoln is not at all policy focused. It's really about participation and things like that. So it depends on the film, but we really look at it in those three different ways. And so a movie like Food Inc., one of the biggest impacts was the fact that people decided to start buying organic. So that's a personal change, a personal behavior change that you've made, but you aggregate that across a lot of people and it starts to make a big impact. And so, each time we set out to create a campaign, we have certain benchmarks that we try and hit, and then often they're different where we end up with, but we've at least looked at and tracked sort of how it goes against those different things.
So impressed with your film. I've been working in international hunger for the past 25 years, and it's great to be woken up to the issue right here in our backyard. Different issue here than it is internationally, and the numbers are obviously, we're talking 850 million people internationally here, but it's the same issue, and I'm just interested in this taking action. I briefly saw a text thing up there, and I was wondering, how is that like Waiting for Superman, where there's an ongoing connection?
Yes. So thank you for what a great segue. So if everyone wants to take out their phones and text food to 77177, I think there's some postcards that will be when you exit. You can join the campaign. And so you'll be given information about how to take action. You'll be given updates on the campaign. You'll also be given updates on articles and basically other pieces of news and information in and around this issue of hunger. And so we as a company are committed to this campaign for 2 years. And that means an active campaign for 2 years. So we continue our films into legacy. So even though Waiting for Superman came out about 2 years ago, we're still doing a lot of work around that, and we've created a community. And similarly here, we've already built a pretty substantial community for the film being out fewer than 4 weeks. And so we anticipate that will continue. And so as the legislation changes and as other opportunities come in, we want people to continue to take action. And so that's the whole idea of our action center, is that people can go in, and this week there could be a hunger march downtown LA, and you can participate at that and find out about that. And then in 6 months there can be some other event and or sort of petition that needs to be signed and things like that. So the two things to do is to text food to 77177 or to go to takepart.com/table. And that's where you can enter in sort of the whole world of A Place at the Table. There are resources, there are going to be videos, there's a whole host of information there.
I wanted to ask a question about your strategy, which you've touched on somewhat, in terms of what you would have in the film and what you decided not to have in the film. I saw the review of the film in the New York Times, and I was surprised, but it was interesting. They were reviewing the film that they would have made. But I wanted to ask you about that, because it's clearly you made a decision to make a film that would serve a certain purpose, but not to go in a more hard-hitting, finger-pointing direction. And I just wanted to, and yet they're dinging you for not having done that, because they're looking at it from a pure film point of view, whereas you have a very different overall strategy. And I wonder if somebody would comment on that.
It's funny, because the next week that same person did the same thing with another documentary. I was like, I think you need to go out and make some documentaries, because you have to stop telling people what you would do.
Yeah.
You know, it really goes back to like having an inclusive film and not having something that is going to that you are going to show to the people who already are on board. And if there are a lot of those documentaries, and there are documentaries on hunger in America that there are. If you want to go find something that will tell you, the activist films really that are just like, go and do X, Y, and Z, and this is what has to happen. And they have an absolute place, but they tend to stay in a smaller realm. And we wanted to really have a very wide sphere. We wanted to start a national dialogue with this film. And if we had done that, we just would never have been able to. And we've been at the White House. We've been, you know, we had Jim McGovern, fabulous Jim McGovern, was on the, you know, on the floor talking to Congress and talking about the film and about hunger. And I mean, you know, if this was a film that was just a rant, he would never have done that. So it's all of those things that really contribute. And also, you know, when we do kind of get into, I mean, like, my mother is an anti-hunger activist. I grew up with this. She started the food bank in New York. It's the whole, you know, the whole 9 yards. And you know, believe me, I know what this film could have been. I've heard that yelling, you know, a lot in my life. So, you know, but it's having, you know, Courtney and Diane also to kind of pull us back in those moments where, you know, you do get enraged. But it is something that you need to find that balance. So
I want to thank our fabulous panel, and I want for coming. Thank you. And for the work you're doing.